So we're here with another episode of Retrospectives, and you're here with me, John Murray.
Hi, Karen.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you came. You came all the way in for Edmonton.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and we're shooting this during training week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great week. Yep. It's
So,
nice to get together with everybody.
Yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Do you want to tell people about training week?
Well, where to start? Well, it's great. It's a great time for all of us to get together, collaborate as a team, learn new things. And yeah, I don't know, that's a generic answer, but really that's what it is. But, the best part of it is the team building, absolutely.
Yeah, it's an old tradition at APTN. I didn't invent it. It's something that's been going on for years where they shut down for a week. And they bring everybody in and you get a chance to pitch and learn new things and upgrade your skills. Nobody really likes the fact that we're off the air for a week, but we can't figure out any other way to do it with the size of staff and the way that we're located all across the country. So not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing, yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you because I thought that, well, first of all, I think your piece is great, and we'll get to that at the end of the show. But I wanted to kind of start on the fact that your background is actually in Native Studies.
Yes, that's what my degree is in, yeah. Native Studies with a minor in English, focus on creative nonfiction. And the Native Studies part of it was a lot of legal stuff. I was looking at going to law school, but I ended up bailing on that idea.
And why didn't you go into law school?
I wanted to tell stories. I was really inspired by the English part of it and, with the creative nonfiction focus. And yeah, that was really the direction I wanted to go in.
Well, a lot of people, like we say, fall into journalism, and I always like to start out with that because I think for a lot of young people who may not have a degree in journalism but really want to come and work at APTN, this is like great for them to know that you don't have to have that degree to be a journalist. Journalists come from all walks of life, and I assume that I can only assume that Native Studies and English really helped inform the journalism that you're doing today.
I like to think it does, absolutely. There's a lot of brilliant people, it really introduced me to a lot of things, as an Indigenous person, you live a lot of these things. But sometimes it takes, an academic to help you articulate it into, wow, this is the reality, this is what's happening around you, So absolutely, it informs it.
Yeah, well, I know when I went to university, I was taking Native history. I knew my family history, my community history, because you just know it because you grow up in it. But I actually didn't have until I took this course sort of like all the information about other communities and like a historic sense of Indian affairs and the different conflicts. That was all school learning for me.
Yeah, and that's what it was for me too. Exactly. You hear about your own community, or you're dealing with what you have where you live, but yeah, you don't really see these bigger, higher level things like the conflict with government and that. I mean, you hear about it, but yeah, the internal conflict. I mean, we all seen Oka and all those events, but that's different.
Was there any event like that kind of, like you said, like you were inspired by the writing? What about being inspired by the news? Was there anything that kind of left an impression on you that led you to go into the field?
Not really. I mean, I've been a big APTN fan for a long time, probably since its inception, so that helped a lot. I mean, all the people that come through here, they've been inspiring, and the people that are here now are inspiring. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything specific that really brought me to it, but yeah.
Well, you didn't go straight away into journalism. You actually owned your own company, did you not?
I did. I had a courier company, and I was hauling around construction material for a while, and then Saskatchewan actually announced that they're giving out liquor licenses for beer delivery. So I got into that. I totally shifted the focus, and yeah, and I did that for a while. But again, I wanted to tell stories. I didn't want to be an entrepreneur, and the business was actually pretty successful. But yeah, this wasn't what I wanted to do, so I tried to get my manager to take it over, but yeah, it just didn't stick with it. And
you still didn't, after you left that company, you still didn't go into journalism?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I was a stay-at-home dad for a while, yeah.
And you have 2 kids?
I have 2 boys, yeah, 10 and 7. Oh, they're wonderful guys. Yeah.
So how did you like being a stay-at-home dad?
I loved it, actually, yeah. There's There were some challenges, like no change tables in men's rooms, and but people had their assumptions. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience to be able to spend that time with my boys, and a lot of my contemporaries. Because before I ran my own business, I worked in the patch, so it's a masculine environment. So a lot of these guys never had that experience, and we never talked about that as part of the parenting experience. So when I had my children and I was able to do that, it was wonderful. Like I wouldn't give it up at all.
Yeah, because I mean, you just reminded me, because they have like a lot of family bathrooms and stuff like that now, but that all started to change when guys started to stay home with the kids, right? That's true that wasn't there a lot, and like really a lot in our communities, fathers tend to be very absentee. So you were like going right against the trend.
Absolutely, I was, yeah.
And I want to ask you about, you mentioned the oil patch. I thought that was after you had your business. It was before you had your business.
Yeah, I worked in the patch for seven and a half years. Yeah, I worked for a service company, and then they got me my heavy truck license. So then I drove heavy truck out there, and I drove off-road, and it was a really interesting experience. We could probably talk a long time about some of the experiences I've had there,
But tell me what it's like working on the patch, because I've heard so many different things about it. I've heard, like you said, it was a very masculine environment. I've heard different things about how well people get treated, and you got to see the inside of all that. And then we do so many stories related to oil and oil development. So this is a good opportunity to find out, like, I'm sure people are curious about what it's like inside. We do have people that work inside, but I think it makes for a lousy dinner conversation because it's so controversial, right? Between the communities that want oil development and those that don't. It
is controversial. And, one of the communities I went to was Colville Lake, Northwest Territories. And they hired local people from the community. And one of the things you noticed right away is the Indigenous people sat on one side of the lunchroom, and all the workers from down south sat on the other side of the lunchroom. So, you try and get that intermingling, and I mean, actually, honestly, one day I went in and I sat on the Indigenous side of the lunchroom, and my colleagues were all like, "What's he doing?"
They didn't know?
Oh, they knew, but yeah, it's just... Yeah, we were just supposed to stick to our own crowd, I guess. I don't know. There's never a spoken rule. Of course it wasn't, but yeah.
It's funny how that happens, because I've noticed, like, just when we go to events and stuff, we do kind of, it's not always of segregation. Sometimes we just seek each other out. When we go to an event and we have a big APTN crowd there, we always have to make extra room at the tables because all the other Anishinaabe, they're in the room, will want to come and sit at our table instead of just sitting out by themselves or mingling in. But I guess a lot of it's just having things in common to talk about. Did you get a feeling that it was kind of that friendly separation, or was there something more to it?
I like to think it was just that kind of friendly, separation. But yeah, there's a lot of racist attitudes in the patch. I mean, I say it bluntly because it is. Some people out there are really openly racist. Not everyone is. You can't make this stereotype of the oil patch worker. But yeah, it can be challenging, and I think there is definitely that element in there for sure.
And long days, and not a lot of women around either.
No, there isn't. Yeah, there are women that work out there, but it's like minuscule amount, 1%. Yeah.
Have you thought about going back and doing any stories around it?
Not really. No. I've been enjoying the stories I've been chasing, and it would be interesting. Certainly it'd be a lot of cool visuals that a lot of people never really get to see.
So you're a guy with an oil patch in your background, but coming to APTN. What actually brought you here is we decided a few years ago, we'd had an internship program for a while, but we decided to actually do a fellowship for people that were more mid-career and might want to get into journalism or had been journalists and want to upgrade their skills. And that fellowship gives you 12 weeks. Is it 12 weeks?
I think it was 12 weeks when
12
I did
weeks.
it, but
Okay,
yeah, I think it's 16
it's 12 weeks
now.
then.
Yeah, maybe it is. But
And we embed you with our investigative unit, and we give you a salary, and we give you project money, and you get to make your own documentary. So tell me how you heard about it and how you came in from it from your perspective.
Well, I've been really active for many years on social media, and I actually have another project that I do on social media that really focuses on Indigenous people and Indigenous voices. So these things just come in front of me all the time. So I think probably the day the fellowship was announced, I saw it. And I wanted to jump on it. I'd never done television at all, ever.
Oh, you had done radio, though.
But I had done radio, I had done a bit of radio and a little bit of writing here and there, to some free publications. And then actually, before the oil patch, I was a computer guy, too. I worked in a computer shop, and I wrote a weekly column there as well. John's Computer Talk, how original is that? Yeah. So I had a taste of it all, and the idea of doing something investigative in a big project like that, I had to do it. And fortunately, you guys brought me on, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Well, tell me, because don't just tell me. I want people to apply for this. We've done it every year since. So you were the very first fellow that we took on, but we're on number 3 now, and we're going to be doing more. So, I mean, maybe you want to just take the opportunity to tell anybody who thinks they want to jump into this about writing your pitch, what your idea was, how you worked on it, why you think it was a successful pitch.
Oh, I have to think back a little bit on that. Yeah, it was challenging to write the pitch because I really wanted it to be good. I didn't write it in a pitch style, though, because I didn't really know. And then basically it was just 2 paragraphs, and I sent it off to Paul, and I sent a sample of some of my photography, and I think I sent a couple of stuff that I did for a couple of online publications. But the pitch itself was healthcare related. And that kind of, I can't remember exactly specifically what it was, to be honest, but as we know in this industry, the story changed as it developed. So,
yeah. So you ended up with a documentary, and it was.
What was the title of it? Yeah, isn't that awful? Yeah, but it was a great documentary. I met this gentleman in Calgary, Dene fella, who wasn't being treated well by INAC, or specifically First Nations Inuit Health Branch. And there was this connection there with his dental care and the fact that he had this lung infection. And, people would correlate the two in theory, but no doctor seemed to want to narrow it down and say, yes, you keep getting lung infections because of this dental care hasn't been done. And, this is huge in our communities. Dental care, there's always a fight and a push, it seems like. So.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's more than dental care, but it seems for some reason when we go to do these stories on First Nations Inuit Health Branch, and for people who, sometimes we talk in code, people who might be listening or seeing this who aren't First Nations, we don't get our health care from the province like everybody else. We get it through this federal program. And a lot of times it doesn't work. I saw a lot of things when I was working I briefly worked at Assembly of First Nations for a few years as a health communications officer. And we get lots of stories about people, with cancer needed a travel companion, and they wouldn't pay for it. And they had to go back and fight. And it's awful when you're sick to have to go back and fight bureaucrats to get the health care that you need. Often it's hard to get at those stories because people are at the weakest moment of their life. They're fighting for their health care, so they feel like they're fighting for their life. And they're the most frightened to actually do anything to upset the bureaucrats. They just, so most of them don't go to media. I think that's why we get the dental care. It's serious, but for a lot of it, people feel like it's not as life-threatening, maybe. Although in this case, it was health serious. It was
really serious. And, and he had to go out by ambulance several times. And, it's fortunate he was in Calgary and he was able to get picked up by ambulance. Yeah. And then the other side of that too, you know, you have these dentists who are dealing with an insurance company that isn't an insurance company. And it's a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And there's all these hoops they have to go through. And then, you know, one of the lines in Surviving Bureaucracy was where the dentist said,
that was the title.
That's the title.
Surviving Bureaucracy.
Yeah. He says, I got into this to help people, not do paperwork. You know? But he's got all these hoops to jump through. And then, you know, an Indigenous person goes into this dental office and they get a sense that these people aren't really happy dealing with it. And sometimes it may come across as racist, but that's not the case. It's somebody wants to do the job they love, but they're having all these other things dumped on them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's been ongoing problems with that as well. There's dentists that won't take First Nations patients because they don't get paid as much and they don't get paid on time. That's something that we should... we're having our pitch sessions this week, and it's just like everything's a story. There's so much to do.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, and there's so much of that in our communities, especially when it comes to, you know, these bureaucracies.
And so your fellowship ended. Why are you still here?
Well, you know what? Thanks to you. You know?
I don't think thanks to me. I think thanks to you.
But yeah, it was. It's, you know, I did that story, and I really wanted to stay here, and I came to you, and I came to Paul, and I said, oh, I'd like to stay on, you know, put me on news or something, and you did, and it was a wonderful experience.
Well, the good news is that the fellowship ended right around the summer, and we have a lot of people going off. It gets really tight. People get exhausted. The staff was coming to me and saying, you know, like, make it easy on us, please. Oh, I seem to be getting messages. I have to explain it because I know the mic's picking it up. You know, so I thought, you know, well, here's this guy. He wants to keep working for us. Why don't I just keep him on as our summer student, our summer backfill? I mean, you weren't a student, usually bring a student, but so we kept you on. You got a taste of the daily news. A spot opens up on Investigates, and congratulations on being the successful candidate.
Yeah, thank you. And that was an amazing opportunity. And, you know, I didn't have an investigative background other than that fellowship. So, you know, it's incredible. And it's been a huge learning curve. But, you know, digging deep is just great, you know, because you want to get in there, you want to find that stuff out. And, you know, when I was doing news, just even having that taste of it from the fellowship, sometimes I'd be digging in there so hard, and I'm like, no, this has got to go out today.
Yeah, I think that the secret to being an investigative news reporter is that you have to live with the fact that you're filing something today and tomorrow's a new day, and you're going to maybe chase that story in the background or get another story on it tomorrow. But you never get to the complete putting the whole picture together, which you do get in Investigates. Yeah. Let's talk about your piece.
Sure.
So Cowboys and, I'm going to say this wrong, Pretendians? Is that how we say it? Pretendians?
Yeah,
Cowboys and Pretendians?
Yeah,
what was the idea there? Tell us about it.
I wanted to look at stereotypes in the film industry. It was pretty well the symbol of it, and I started looking at, well, really it was also partly to do with Adam Beach had an open letter that he published and was calling out Hollywood executives for whitewashing Indigenous film and hiring pretendians. A pretendian is somebody who may not be Indigenous, but they're going to play an Indigenous role. Yeah. Or some of them even do pretend to be Indigenous for whatever reason.
Because there's a lot of harms in it, right? Like there's the first of all, the fakeness, the not getting things right, the silliness of it all. We should have actually played flute music at the beginning of this and had our hair blowing in the wind, because, you know, that's part of the stereotype. But then, like, there's the real problem of actors not getting jobs, right?
Yeah. It is a big problem. And, you know, and then when they get jobs, like a certain very, very, I don't know if I should name it or not, but there was one film that was, well, actually I had it in the doc, so yeah, the Ridiculous Six, you know. The actors there, they got jobs there, but then they didn't like the set they were working on. And only some of them walked off the job. Because
was that that was the Adam Sandler one?
That's the Adam Sandler one.
Yeah, that was, I saw the complaints. It was like, yeah. I don't find them funny anyway, but that was really not funny.
No, they weren't. The names, you know, there was a lot of ways you could have made
There were weird
clever
jokes about, you know, pee-pee wiping or
Exactly,
some damn thing, you know, it's like toilet paper and, you know, a lot of ugh, how kind of talk.
Exactly, yeah, you know, they could have went in a totally different direction, but, you know, maybe that's the style he does, you know, I'm with you, I don't think I'm a big fan either.
So there's the stereotype harm, the inability to get jobs. What else, what did you want people to take away from that?
Storytelling. You know, film, even just telling stories, is a very Western thing, the way we see it. There isn't really an Indigenous element, you know. Film is relatively new. It's only 100 years old. You know, Indigenous storytelling, depending on your community, like Mi'kmaq, it's 13,000-year-old tradition. It's not, you know. How do we make that compatible with film? You know, and meanwhile, we have a film industry that's defined how it's done, and they've made the formula. So, you know, that's the big part of it too. You know, there's different ways to tell stories, and I talked to some people, and that, you know, that was some of their input as well.
And it's interesting that sometimes the way to solving a problem is also just telling a story, like you did.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking to me today.
All right. Thank you, Karen. It's been a pleasure.